Well, good afternoon, folks. Welcome to our last recommended session of the UDL Practicum, a panel discussion with instructors who have implemented UDL in their courses. And I've got three instructors here with me today who have done this over the course of a few years and are going to share their experiences with you. If you guys could introduce yourself, give your name, the course you taught, and then we'll dive into talking about UDL. David, why don't you go first? You were here first.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, everybody. My name is David Knopfs. I'm a senior learning designer in the School of Professional Studies, but I also teach in the School of Professional Studies in the specialization, which is information design and strategy specialization. A lot of our students are learning to become learning designers, instructional technologists, trainers, and so a lot of what I teach is around how to design lessons for online learning, and accessibility is a big part of that.
Ilya, how about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Ilya Michelson. I'm an associate professor of instruction in electrical engineering. I teach a handful of courses. The ones I'll focus on here are going to be Engineering Analysis 1, which is a course that all freshman engineers have to take. So it's about 500 students in that course. And the other one is Introduction to Electrical Engineering, which is a smaller course, usually around 40 or so people. So yeah, quite different experiences, but hopefully I can touch on both.
And Judy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Judy Franks. I'm an assistant professor at Medill, and I teach in the Integrated Marketing Communications program. I teach undergrads and grads, and I teach on-premise and also online. And my main courses I teach are consumer insight and media and marketing courses.
Well, thank you to all three of you for being here today. Why don't we just go to our panel, and I'll ask the first question here. What UDL elements have you implemented in your course that you found to be successful? You could explain a little bit about what you did and how you did that. And I will, we'll start with Judy.
So actually, I've been at this for a while. So I've taken baby steps, but each quarter, I try to take an additional baby step. So there are a lot of things that are in place now. One of the things, in fact, the really interesting thing is, where does UDL start and stop relative to flipped classroom pedagogy? So I've taken a lot of my materials that I would historically deliver in the classroom, and I've now put them onto Canvas in different modalities. So whether it's video, but also things that people can read. I'm also doing redundancy between video and podcasts because I notice some students like to read and listen. So really taking that time stress out of the classroom and moving the materials onto Canvas so students can process at their own pace. So that's been a big change that I've made. Another big change that I've made, and we'll talk about this in a little bit because it's kind of a mixed bag, is I've taken the constraints off of my assignments in terms of format, and I give students a lot of creative freedom to answer the assignment however they want based upon their own preferred way of expressing themselves. And like I said, we'll talk about that in a bit. So those would be, I'd say, the two key areas of change that I've made. Oh, also, I no longer time any of my assessments for any student in the classroom.
Thanks, Judy. Ilya, how about, or David, you look like you're ready to go. So why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I was just going to jump in. Yeah, I think the biggest changes that I made to IDS 425, which is Learning Environment Design course I teach, it has really been to deliver the content that I used to have. I used to have weekly videos, which at the time I thought was delivering, the content in a different way rather than a regular written or lecture format. But what I did is I changed it so that I have multiple ways of delivering the content week after week to help with engagement. So I did this just about a year ago, changed it so I've got video one week, I've got audio where I just do like a podcast style several weeks. And then some weeks I just have literally like a brief text introduction. And then the other thing that I did throughout the course was that I have let students submit assignments in multiple formats. So video, written, or their own podcast style, and trying to get students thinking of different ways that they can express their ideas and submit their work. So those are probably the two biggest changes that I think I've made over the past year to my courses.
Thanks, David. Ilya, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm really into making supplementary videos for my classes. That's one of the biggest things that I've done, and I've been doing that for a little while at this point. Actually, I started in 2013, so I guess that's 10 years ago at this point. It's pretty crazy. But I started with making short little videos to kind of supplement the material in the classroom, and posted those on YouTube so students would have easy access to them. And they range anywhere from like a couple of minutes to explain a problem or two to maybe like 10 to 20 minutes to get into like a deeper dive about a classroom topic. And around 2017, I started also recording all of my lectures just live and posting them in a private channel on YouTube also for my students to be able to access. And it's been great. I mean, everybody likes having that as a resource. I started doing it because I myself prefer videos to learn new material. Whenever I want to learn anything new, my first go-to is YouTube, and then textbooks and other such resources. So I figured I'd kind of do what feels natural for me. So that's been one thing. And another thing I've experimented with, so this is pretty brand new. In fact, I'll be talking about this at TCHEX, is I've modified my exams in Introduction to Electrical Engineering to be a choice of topics which kind of engage students in a different way and allow them to express themselves in different ways. And specifically, I mean, this is for electrical engineering, but I hope this kind of same thing can apply to other disciplines. But there I had them either analyze a circuit, which is more just, you know, analysis skills, build a circuit, which is more kind of, a hands-on approach, which some people prefer, or to write a children's book about a class topic, which was more of a creative route. And all of these were over the course of several days, so no real time constraints realistically. And it proved to be a really fun and I think worthwhile experience. So I did that for both my midterms and my final exam. I ran it for the first time last quarter, so I don't have a huge amount of data yet, but at least preliminary data, which I'm happy to share throughout this panel.
Well, thank you all. Ilya, I'm going to keep this with you to start the next question. Sure. I think this is a great follow-up to what you just said, but I'd be interested to know how these UDL changes that you have made have impacted students in your class and what kind of feedback you've had around the changes and that'll go for all of you, but we'll start with Ilya here.
Sure. Yeah, so for the videos, I think it's pretty straightforward. I mean, especially for things like lecture recordings, it's very low burden for me. And yet when students aren't able to come to class for any number of reasons, they have the actual like happenings of the class on record. So, you know, they're not trying to play catch up. They have the actual record of what happened. So that's been pretty much unanimously positive that's available. I started off actually, when I first started doing it, I would only release the videos on like a case-by-case basis. So a student would be like, I'm going to be out, so can I please have the video? And I'd be like, sure, and because I thought that if I would release them for everyone, then attendance would go way down, but that was actually not the case, as I learned later when I just decided to ultimately just release them. Yeah, so that was a pleasant surprise for me, and again has been well received by the students. The helper videos as well, that one I can't say as much what impact it made because I actually did it my first year teaching. So I don't have really a before and after. Just I think the students have used it as a resource. I know that from CTEX, from word of mouth, but I don't know how things were before necessarily. As far as the tests, that one has been an interesting experience because I thought it would be kind of double-edged because these examinations did end up taking a lot more time. So, an in-class exam, that's 1 hour, for better or worse, you're done. With these, I asked the students to write down how long the experience took them, and it was pretty much, very consistently over like 3 hours, even up to like 10 hours in some cases. And after the midterm, I actually asked the class, I asked them, do you want to keep doing it this way? Because I noticed that instead of 1 hour, some of you took 10 hours. And everybody said yes, they would prefer that. And the responses were mostly, it took 10 hours because I had the time to double check my work and just and try different things and different approaches, things I couldn't do in a regular exam. So, they said they could have probably done it in an hour if they were crammed for time, but because they weren't, they very much appreciated and were okay with taking the extra time. So I think actually out of the class of 40, one student, because this was an anonymous poll, but one student dissented and said, I would prefer an in-class exam. But yeah, it was pretty much everybody saying they preferred this approach. So I think that the overall impact has been very positive in both cases with the videos and with the exams.
And before I let David and Judy answer that question, I do have just one quick follow-up with this, because if it's so new, do you feel like you've seen, are the students understanding your material better when they have that opportunity to go in and display things that way as opposed to an exam?
Yeah, that's also a great question, and one that I kind of wrestle with myself and want to kind of look into more. I think that the work that students produced was higher caliber than what they could have produced on an in-class exam. And by the way, another nice thing that comes out of this, so I've had experience with take-home exams before. I'm not a huge fan because the temptation to cheat is quite high, and some people succumb to it, and that's unfortunate. I would prefer to make sure everybody, is on the same kind of playing field. With this, cheating was almost impossible, actually. I mean, it would have been so obvious if somebody wrote a children's book together. It would be the same book. Or if they built exactly the same circuit. Just from the very nature of it, there are very natural variations that are very obvious. And I'm glad to say I didn't see any indications of cheating on these exams. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked. Can you please state your question one more time?
I think you got most of that. I was kind of getting at, do you feel like the students understand things better?
Oh, yes, exactly. The part I wrestle with is does it actually test the same breadth of knowledge as traditional exams? And the answer is no. Right, because I tell them, build this circuit. Does that circuit test exactly the same things that analyzing a circuit or writing the children's book is going to test? And the answer is definitely no. So the students get to pick kind of a niche in what they actually are passionate about and display that they are good at that thing. Now, I think that each of those topics is representative of the course as a whole. But of course, it is not all the material in the course as a whole. Only a paper exam on every single topic with short questions could actually tackle that, right? So it is a little bit, I'm a little torn on that aspect of it because, yeah, it could be the student, only learned literally one thing the whole course and can ace my exam. And is that a fair assessment of everything they've learned throughout the course? I mean, my claim is yes, because any takeaways on that level of understanding, I think, are a great outcome for a course, but not everybody may agree with that. So I would say that yes, I am a little torn on that aspect.
All right. Well, thanks, Ilya. Judy, how about you? How about student impact and any feedback you've gotten on your UDL adjustments?
So the interesting thing is the main feedback I've received are from students who otherwise didn't require any learning accommodations. Their stress levels went way down. So the fascinating thing is, here we make adjustments to embrace learners of all abilities and all different styles. But the students who just historically go about their business, they didn't have accommodations through ANU, just giving them the flexibility and the options to do things at their own pace. It was amazing because I heard that time and again, like, oh my gosh, this was so helpful not to have a timed exam. Or I really enjoyed having the opportunity to listen at my own pace. So that was really, really cool.
Awesome. David, how about you?
Yeah, I think for my students, the biggest feedback that I get from it is really the students sort of tend to tailor their assignments or their submissions. They use the technology they need, so they feel more empowered. When they feel like, oh, I can leverage whatever is the best kind of technology, and so that's a real, it's a real break for a lot of them. In fact, some of the students who are new in the program come in and it takes a little bit of time for them to sort of get acclimatized. They expect everything to be given to them in a kind of a written format or even a video format, and when they're allowed to submit in multiple different ways, they feel like they have more control over the technology, which I think is transformative for a lot of them. They're not used to that.
I've really adopted this new philosophy that if I'm asking students to come to class, whether it's come to class on Zoom or come to class in a physical classroom on campus, that classroom experience needs to be enhanced by the collective experiences of us all being together. So I've literally reshaped my curriculum in such a way, and some students, you're going to like this, some students complain and say, this is not a course where you can come to class, chill and lean back and just take notes. You need to be like prepared, and she makes you participate throughout class. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, but yeah, you're right. So the idea is, what can we do in a classroom that we otherwise could not do? So I do a lot more, I'll throw a case up on the wall and I'll say, based on your readings and based upon what we're talking about, let's get into groups of 4 students and debate the pros and cons of this case. And you've got 20 minutes, and then I'm going to bring the class back together and hear from each group. And then I use it kind of like as a live teaching model. So it the interesting thing is it makes them excited to come to class, and they know that they can't miss class because their experiences, like they can't just grab lecture notes from another student.
One of the questions that I usually ask right at the beginning, and I didn't this time, but I'll come back to it, is what made you decide to do this? What made you decide to want to approach things from a UDL perspective? And Judy, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Okay. Couple of very personal reasons, one of which is I am legally deaf. And so as some of you might see the closed captioning at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So understanding that not all modalities work for me, taking away that barrier, because I love what I do at Northwestern. I've been at Northwestern for 14 years. I'd be heartbroken if my disability led me to have to leave. So I will fight and claw and make sure that I can still be a great educator. And then the other real personal experience is my son, who's now 25, is on the autism spectrum, and his brain works differently. And I watched him all throughout school, in some ways really excel, but in some ways, fail miserably when, the teacher had a set approach, and here's your graphic organizer, and here's how you're going to do it. And this, like they put so many constraints around him that I realized like he's a super smart kid, and we were imposing barriers on his ability to express himself. So when Jim approached me and asked if I wanted to be a part of the pilot, it was really personal, and I was really grateful for the opportunity.
Thanks, Judy. David, how about you?
Well, apart from, the work that I do as a learning designer for distance learning, has taught me over the years that that's fundamental to all of our courses. We want to make sure that any course that we work on, that we design, is accessible to all of our students. But it's also, there's a personal side as well. During my teaching, I've worked with students with some severe challenges, some learning challenges, and it's really been those teaching moments where I've had to work with students via Zoom calls and actually watch them go through using a screen reader, for example, that I realized just how critical is, important it is that, that we make sure that all of our courses are accessible to students. It's their gateway to the knowledge that we're providing. And so, it's very personal to me. And when instructors, think of it as being kind of a, something that's a luxury, I remind them that, if there's just one single student that we can extend this to and make our courses available to them and the information that we provide, then it's worth the effort to go that extra step. So both personal and also professional.
Thanks, David. Ilya, how about you?
Yeah, I started doing these things mostly just because I thought that they would have been helpful to me when I was a student, and I thought I would share that with all of my students. So, like I mentioned, I like learning from videos, so I made a bunch of videos. I don't like traditional exams, so I tried to change that as well. In the background, obviously, I'm always thinking about, is what we're currently doing the best way for students to actually learn and express themselves? And in my opinion, there's more that could be done. And again, with the videos, the simplest thing: record your lectures. I mean, not everybody is able to make it for whatever reasons, and they should not be disadvantaged because of it. With exams, not everybody takes exams the same way. I mean, that's evident from before college with standardized tests, and I mean testing in general. It's evident in college for sure. And why should we say that everybody should express their knowledge in the same exact way? So kind of revisiting those things in my head often kind of formulates a game plan for me, and it materializes over maybe the course of years, not like spontaneously, because I've only tried the exam thing for the first time this year, and I've been teaching for a decent amount of time now. So I think just constantly thinking about what could be improved is my main kind of driving force for making these changes.
Awesome. Thanks. What unexpected difficulty have you run into during implementation, or what have you tried UDL wise that didn't work?
Yeah, so I've run into a couple surprising issues, one of which is we're dealing with, and I'll focus more on undergrad and our younger grad students. They've come out of an education system where they were told precisely what to do. Like, here's your rubric, here's your graphic organizer, here's the word count. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And in my assignments, I now give students incredible creative freedom, and it causes a new level of anxiety because they come to me, well, what's the word count? Like, what do you, and I'm like, you don't even have to do words. You can do a podcast if you want. Well, should my video, if I want to do a video, should it be 10 minutes long? And I'm like, it should be as short or as long as you need for it to be to communicate the assignment. And that freedom causes a new level of anxiety. So I've been speaking with Jim, and Jim has encouraged me to maybe dial it back a little bit. So instead of just giving them, complete creative freedom, to give them choices and guidelines, like you may want to consider this, you may want to consider that, to kind of help them. And then the other thing, I still haven't cracked the code on how to embrace UDL in group work. So how do you manage the fact that you put together a group of 5 students, and 4 out of 5 students want to work a certain way, and that 5th student is a different type of learner? How do we negotiate that? And that's something that I continue to work with Jim on to get help. I have not cracked the code on that yet.
That is a tough one. We're still we're still looking at what the best approach for that would be. But Judy, thank you for being with us today and appreciate all your work with UDL.
Well, thank you and good luck to everyone. My apologies for having to leave early.
All right, David and Ilya, same question to the two of you. What kind of difficulty have you run into during implementation of something, or is there something that hasn't worked? Because a lot of this is some kind of experimenting with things and seeing what does and doesn't work. So there are bound to be things that don't sometimes. So David, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I think that Judy kind of hit on it, but I think that creating some stress where perhaps it's unexpected for students, just sort of giving them too many options to go with. And I've had students come back to me and just just say, look, can you prescribe a way for us to do this? If you leave it too open, a lot of students are kind of stressed out by having that choice. So I think that's one thing. And then the other is just creating like a video format or an audio format, and making it easy for students to be able to get access to the different formats in the one place. So it's more of a design problem that I've seen, but it's like not trying to have too many pages for students to have to kind of navigate. So navigation can be a real hazard for a lot of students, and making sure that they can find a path to the information without having too many alternatives. If they can go to, if they have video, audio, and text all over the place, it can throw them off a little bit. So navigation, you got to watch out for that.
Great. Ilya, how about you?
Yeah, so I guess kind of a pretty, I thought it was a pretty interesting experience with the video lectures. So for the 2020, I guess the fully remote year that started in 2020, over the summer, I recorded basically a set of brand new videos to cover the entire class that I was about to teach, the engineering analysis class. And the idea was that now we could make it a flipped classroom so that students could watch the videos, because it's all going to be online anyway, right? So they can watch the videos asynchronously, and we could use class time as discussion to reinforce those concepts. All the videos cumulatively were the same length as lectures would have been. So, no video was like egregiously long or anything like that. But then we got a lot of complaints. So we took surveys throughout the quarter, and the complaints said that the videos are taking significantly longer than class would have taken if we had regular lectures. And we kind of pressed like, well, why? And they're like, well, because we're watching them at half speed, because we want to be able to write everything down. And so, it's taking twice as long. And we're like, but imagine a lecture, you couldn't just slow down the lecture to half speed. I mean, you'd be writing and listening. So this is a luxury, right? That you're able to slow it down to half speed, pause everywhere, take notes and everything like that. But it didn't really click in that same sense because given the option, the students chose to take longer, which is beneficial to them, but it took more time, and they didn't like that it took more time. So that was completely out of our control at that point, but ended up being a challenge that ultimately we decided to go back to the regular lecturing style when we were allowed to go back in person. So entire video series, it's still used as supplementary material. So I'd say not a waste at all. It's helpful, but not being used in the intended purpose because of the feedback that we got. So that was a bit eye-opening. For the exams, the new style of exams, I mean, I don't know, again, if I would call it lack of success so much, but the one student who said that they would prefer regular exams, you obviously can't please everyone, and we don't have the resources to do both an in-class exam and 4 options for alternate exams and make everything fair. So I would say that's kind of a shortcoming, because I'm sure there are people who just actually genuinely prefer sitting down and taking a written exam. And even if we try to move away from that, those people exist. And, as we move away from it, we are disadvantaging those people. So I feel like it's hard to basically get every single mode of expression, including the people who actually like scantrons. I'm sure, again, those people exist. So I'd say that's potentially a shortcoming.
I had actually a follow-up question to your multiple ways of assessing folks in the exams. So when you gave that exam or that assignment type thing at the midterm, was the final the same and they just had to choose a different option, or was?
Yes, so yeah, it was based on the topics we had covered up to that point.
Okay.
So yeah, I had 3 options on the midterm and 4 options on the final. And the final options did not overlap. I mean, the children's book as a concept overlapped, but I gave them, so it wasn't just any topic from the class. It was a choice of 5 topics, and they picked 1 for the children's book, and it was a new set of topics for the final compared to the midterm.
Gotcha. Did students tend to pick the same thing for the midterm and the final, or did they change things up a little bit?
So yeah, that's a good question. So because I only had 3 options in the midterm and 4 in the final, there was a mode of expression in the final that wasn't on the midterm. And that was and this is maybe getting a little into the weeds, it was more of a computer science type question. And I had a good number of computer science students in the class. So they, no matter what they did in the midterm, they gravitated towards that question in the final. But I also found that many people who opted for the children's book in the midterm changed their mind by the final, because in my opinion, the children's book is the hardest, and it did result in the overall lowest grades. So I think people realized after the midterm that writing about a complicated engineering concept in children's terms is not trivial. And even though it sounds like it's, I'll just draw some pictures, write some words, it's a lot harder than that. And so I think people steered away from that, because I had an overwhelming majority of children's book for the midterm, and then it was much more evenly spread across the topics for the final.
Gotcha. It's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see. How has your UDL implementation, has it made things easier on you as an instructor? Is there any part of that that has made it a little bit easier on you?
Yeah, I think it's become the norm for me to work that way. So it's made it easier in so much as I know ahead of time what materials I have to prepare and have ready. I also know the technology myself a lot better. I use the technology a lot better. So Canvas has some nice built-in tools, for example, accessibility tools that pop up little warning flags, and they, you can clear them off your text editor as you're going through the process. And so, yeah, I mean, it's made it easier for me to express myself in multiple ways, thereby, really focusing the message of what I'm trying to get across. So I think as a teacher, it makes your teaching better, because you have to be able to express it in multiple modes. So yeah, I really, I have to throw this in too, because, as I told you, I'm speaking from a conference down here in Savannah, Georgia. This is not my usual den, but I'm at a conference down here, and there was discussion about online capabilities and the shortcomings, etc. And when I talk about UDL to a lot of folks down here, it's really still kind of new to a lot of folks who are just now starting to fully embrace online learning. And my message, down here to folks as well, to everybody, is that, embrace it. It becomes part of who you are as a teacher. You just start to take it in stride, and it improves who you are as a teacher.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And Ilya, I'm sure it took a lot of time to create those videos that you've put up for students, but how has adding UDL to your course made things easier for you?
Yeah, so the videos are definitely a sizable upfront investment. But I'd say it's completely worth it. I mean, like I said, well, a lot of the videos I started developing in 2013, and those are still relevant now and are still being used quite a bit. So, I'd say a pretty good return on investment. In terms of the class recordings, minimal effort in reality and pretty high payoff, because before, if somebody misses class, I mean, either I have to meet with them individually and try to kind of rehash the material, or point them to notes that have to be very, very comprehensive. And my notes are not super comprehensive because I write everything by hand in front of the class. So it's more scribbly. But in the context of the class, it makes sense, but if you miss it, then I've got a video I can point to and say, hey, just watch this. So I think in that sense, it's been quite rewarding, as an instructor from a time perspective. I think great return on investment. And again, even with the minimal just recording lectures with a screen capture and a microphone, has been great. As far as the exams, that one, I would hesitate to say that so far has made my life easier. I think it's made it quite a bit harder, because I mean, at that point I'm grading 4 completely separate assessments. Each one I have to develop a rubric, I have to get into the mindset to grade it and everything. And grading is always the same. You grade the first couple and it takes like 10 minutes per each one, and then you kind of get into the groove and you get used to the issues that are there, and everything goes faster. Here, when there is like only a couple of submissions per category, it's basically all the time is spent learning the ins and outs of what the students could have done. The one thing though is that there is, I think, in my opinion, a higher caliber of overall work, so there are fewer mistakes to account for, which is nice. I did see more higher scores on these assessments, which is of course easier to grade when students do well. But still, for the ones that don't do so well, since the tasks were so open-ended, trying to figure out partial credit and seeing like kind of what could have gone wrong is very time consuming. And of course, the initial effort of making the exams has been very time consuming, but now that they're made, I'll be testing them out again when I teach the class next quarter. So, that's already going to be a good starting point. But grading them has definitely been harder than a traditional exam. But I think that's par for the course.
Sure. Awesome. What advice do you have for any instructor looking to implement UDL in their course?
I think that I did sort of allude to it earlier, is if you embrace it, your students will embrace it. If it's natural to you, if it becomes part of your mode of operation, then it becomes part of their mode of operation. And I think that's how we sort of pass this whole idea on to our students as well. And so, make UDL part of who you are as a teacher. Just embrace it. It's really, it's like having ramps on every sidewalk, right? It just makes everybody's life easier in the long run, everybody's. So, yep, embrace it.
Good advice. Thanks, David. Ilya, what advice do you have?
Yeah, well, for the video specifically, my only advice is kind of, just do it. It's never going to be perfect the first time around. I mean, if you're recording lectures, that's easier to get perfect. For making standalone videos, just pick up a microphone and kind of make something. My initial videos, I look back at the quality and it's not where I would want it to be at this point, but they're still watched, they're still useful. There's no harm, and there is a learning curve, but I think that it's very much worthwhile. So kind of just do it for that. But in general, the mindset that I've had is just constant introspection in terms of what could be improved. Basically, don't stop trying to innovate and make things better. If you've done even 10 things already, there's an 11th thing that could be better, and never lose sight of that. I try to revisit that every single quarter I teach, and I think that's the way to go.
Awesome. That's wonderful advice too. Thank you, Ilya. It's been a good experience to hear from you who have done some of this. David, we've been working on UDL for a long time. Thank you for being here today, sharing your experience, and thank you for all you've done. Ilya, you've been doing it for a long time, but we've just kind of started connecting together around it recently. So I appreciate getting your perspective on things and hearing about your experiment that you've started this year, folks. For you, that piece that Ilya talked about the exams, he hadn't done when we first started doing these panels in the summer, and so that's been an addition throughout this year as he's gone around iterating on that. So that's a brand new experiment, and it's been interesting for me to hear how that's progressed throughout the course of the year as well. I really appreciate the two of you sharing your experiences, as well as Judy when she was here sharing her experiences and your work that you're doing around UDL. With that, we will end our session today, and thank you, folks, and thank you for all your support throughout the practicum.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jim.